30-minute session. Stand for the pledge, please. Pledge.
Of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. All right. We have roll call. All right. Fine. We can continue. First thing on the agenda is announcements. And we have feedback.
Yes.
Okay. Just like my ears are ringing. First thing I would like to do is I would like to present Karen Manager with a certificate of compensation for 6 years. 6 years on the board. Karen, you are truly amazing, and thank you for your long service and for being on.
Again, I'm going to ask that we rearrange the order of the agenda to make sure that we deal with things right away. So I suggest that consent agenda, we move toward the back in recognition of visitors and guests, because that's items that are not on the agenda. We also move to the back, and that we follow sensible agenda back to the minutes. I don't think we can rearrange that.
Okay. All right.
And then follow the other. So we put agenda item number 1, visitors and guests, and agenda item number 2, approval of the consent agenda, behind number 50.
All right. So,
Order reports.
Rob Miller is also part of the consent agenda, as well as resolutions. You want 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I think the picking in the park, we might want to take off the consent agenda because there'll be a discussion about that.
Okay.
So that one will stay. That's why I asked for just 1 and 2.
Okay.
Just visitors and guests and the consent. Oh, is
Well, the question,
3 and 4 part of the consent
yes,
agenda? I'm
3 and
confused.
4 are part of the
Okay.
consent agenda.
Then let me restate the motion. I'd like to make a motion that we move recognition of visitors and the guests and approval of minutes. And I think the liquor license we have to do, don't we?
Do we have to do that this time, or can we wait 2 weeks on the liquor change?
It's a change, it's a modification of premise, so that would be your call.
Is it gonna?
I know those are not on a renewal timeline, but I know they're anxious to get it submitted to the state to modify the premise for the summer season.
So do you want to just take the minutes off then?
I just take the minutes of visitors and guests until
Okay.
after 15. So
All right.
that's
So we have a motion to.
it. We have a personal comment.
I also have 2 comments
Oh,
on the
okay.
agenda before you do your final motion. I just want to make a suggestion. This happened on the last packet. There's not a date at the top. We're missing the date of the meeting. So if we can make sure those get reinserted. And I understand you're moving the minutes, but I wanted to point out that the minutes for February 3rd are not actually in this agenda packet.
Yeah.
Just so you know that they need to come back later.
Yeah, well,
And,
if we're probably may not get to them tonight. Maybe we'll do that.
yeah, and I'll talk about the consent agenda when we get there, right?
You mean the liquor license, Rob Miller and the,
Right.
okay,
Do you want to wait till we get to the
Yes.
consent agenda? Okay.
yes.
And those are mine. Oh, and actually, I have one more. I would like to suggest that we continue item 13. No, not 13, I'm sorry, 14. Ad hoc committee recommendation for modified trustee meeting and policy procedures to the next meeting when we have our new trustees.
Oh, in the room.
Yes.
That's a good one. So just delay, are you okay with that,
Or
Jeff?
continue it.
Till next meeting.
Yeah.
But
It'll be under.
I won't be here to
It'll, but
speak on it, so.
it'll be under
Oh,
unfinished
we better-
business, so this board will be the board that talks about it, not the new board, because the new board is sworn in after unfinished.
I'd like it to have to be continued for the new board to
Well,
discuss
for
it.
sure. That's what our plan is, but since this is Jeff's last meeting in person,
Oh, he won't be,
he won't be here next time.
Okay.
So he and I were planning tonight to just explain the rationale for what we wanted to do, but you didn't need to make a decision about it. We
Okay.
didn't need to go into a full discussion.
all right, I retract my
Okay.
proposal.
All right, so we have a motion to put number 1 and number 2 with the, number 1 and the 4 minutes after item 15 on the agenda. All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, anything from the public? Yes, Ms. Watson. 3 minutes, please.
I didn't hear you very well. Did you say me?
Yes.
Suzanne Watson. I really don't see visitors and guests as an agenda item that takes very long, and I consider it to be kind of a war on the public. I would suggest that you're nitpicking at this point, and you shouldn't even consider, I mean, you're taking more time debating this than you probably would have had just by letting people come up. And that being said, since it might not be on the agenda, I'd like to point out that your screen is so cropped up there, and I'm wondering if Jeff couldn't be a third of the screen, and then we can see the whole board and staff. Sorry, Jeff, it's nice to see your face there, but it's hard to see any people talking over on that side of the room. So that's just a request. That was my visitors and guest comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Mr. Bruner. Timer, please.
Hi, thank you. So I'd like you to leave the, excuse me,
Technical difficulties with the timer.
well, I can keep talking. Maybe I'll get an extra 10 seconds. I would like to see you move item 13 to the new board. And if you don't want to, I just want to say I've come up with 2 possibilities for new amendments or new initiatives for the town voters. And the first one says that simply the moratorium in Chapter 16 zoning are hereby repealed in their entirety. To me, the item 13 deals with zoning issues that morph into the use of the water. And if we're not going to enforce the zoning issues, let's just get rid of them and get rid of the moratorium and let her rip. And the other one is a couple of simple amendments to the moratorium that clear up any ambiguities that can be found by really wheedling through the words there. I'm sure we'll talk about it more later, but I don't think there's really any problem with the way it's written. And the other thing is, this is my letter of interest for the soon-to-come open position on the board. I just thought I'd get it in now.
Okay.
So, here we go.
All right, anyone else?
Thank you.
All right, seeing none, let's move on to,
Oh, we have to vote.
oh, I'm sorry, we have a motion in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, let's move on then to number 3, Rob Miller kicking in the parking lot.
I was hoping I could voice an opinion again about the consent agenda. I thought we were talking about just the total agenda, because I think we should, are you taking him off the consent agenda right
Yeah,
now?
he's off the consent agenda
Okay.
as well as the liquor license.
And the liquor, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, sorry,
All right.
Rob.
No worries.
I am Rob Miller, I live on Onarga Avenue, 211 Onarga. I'm here as the owner of Pickin' Productions. I put on Pickin' in the Park, and we're going into our 15th year of Pickin' in the Park this year. It's very exciting. We're in our fundraising campaign right now. So we're establishing our sponsors, and we would love for the town to consider again being a sponsor, as you did last year. What we did was we did an exchange of the park fees for a sponsorship. And we want to see if you'd be up for doing that again.
All right. Questions for Rob from the board? Yes.
Actually, I don't have questions for Rob, but I have questions for Ms. Ferguson about the values that you included, which I really appreciate that we saw some of what it requires in terms of our budget for Pickin' in the Park and maybe some others. But to me, there's some questions about some of those values. And so I'm kind of concerned that this may or may not be what actually needs to be spent for the 4 evenings. I don't know about trash can liners being $300 per event, if that is a throwback from something else, but is that the literal liners for the trash can?
Yes,
$300
not for each night. That's approximately what they spend for the event. Oops,
for all 4 nights?
yes.
And that's the liners, okay. So I just want, in this case, and you kind of went high, I believe, for the trash by ton. So we're looking at, we spend $2,655 for this single event, as posted here, which, thank you for that and clarifying the liners. So I don't have any questions for Rob, but I'll stop there, but I would like to talk to her about this, but I'll stop there.
All right, so any questions for Rob? Okay.
Well, so would you like me to continue? Well, I'm concerned about approving this tonight simply because we got a very excellent email from Michelle Pattison today, which described the sorts of things the GAPSMIT committee had talked about in terms of us being consistent with all the other nonprofits that come in and ask for us to waive their fee. We do not have that policy yet. She brings up some very good points. So I feel like it's premature for us to approve this tonight without creating more of a policy. Because if we say yes to Rob, we obviously have to say yes to everyone else. And I'm not prepared to do that. But we're setting a precedent tonight without, I think, due discussion and a policy being created. And Michelle actually lined out many of the things that we would need to discuss for a policy. So I think it would be easy to put it on the next agenda. And thirdly, I don't feel like it's appropriate for this set of trustees to obligate the next set of trustees to being put in a precedent-setting position without a policy. Thank you.
Oh, all right, thank you. Yes.
Okay, so I was here a year ago, and we had the same discussion, and Michelle Pattison was on the town council at the time, and you guys approved this agreement that you would waive the park fees in exchange for sponsorship. At the time, Michelle has suggested to go into a committee and discuss this. What I had suggested that you guys considered was to take, I can't remember what I called it, I think the legacy events that happen in town. Let's consider it anything that happens, that's been happening consistently over a decade. You know, Mountain Harvest is going into 21st year, Pickin' in the Park's 15, Cherry Days is 500 years, whatever. So, you know, I think those 3 events stand out. So when you do go into this discussion, that would be my 2 cents, is just to separate any nonprofit asking for this to establish events that, you know, I recognize that Pickin' in the Park's going to be happening long after I'm gone. So I'm at a place where I'm looking at this as a town event even more than it is, you know, anything I consider my event. I'm hosting it at the moment. This is going to go on forever. So however, whatever you guys work, I mean, I would much prefer we just get this done for me, and so I can put, you know, the town of Paonia back on the sponsor list and move on with my job. But at some point, I hope the town, we can just figure out a way that you support these really important events in town and not kind of recreate the wheel every year.
Yes, Mr. Kingston.
What if we just make a motion to table this till the next meeting, because the new board will be here? and we can make a decision at that time, and hopefully we would have more of a parameter of an outline, because we already have an excellent email. It kind of gives us an outline of what the policy might look like, and just do it next meeting. And the new board will be seated by then, and we're not obligating anyone. So I move that we continue this.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
Discussion from the board? Okay, seeing none, discussion from the public? All right, seeing none, all in favor of tabling this until the next meeting?
Continuing.
Continuing this until the next meeting?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, let's go back up to.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. We'll see you in 2 weeks. All right, let's go to the liquor license report of changes. So I believe this is just the addition of a patio where they can serve liquor.
Page.
22 on the packet is part of it. That's
Okay, that.
all right, anything you would like to add to that, Ms. Ferguson?
Everything was included in the packet. The area would qualify for an extension. I don't see any issues with the request from the applicant.
Okay, any questions from the board? All right, questions from the public? All right, can we get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion that we approve, I'm trying to get to the title, that we approve the liquor license report of, no.
Yeah.
Do I move that we approve the Like to Bounce Court liquor license modification? Is that the right term?
It's a report of changes.
Report of changes, sorry. Okay, I'll start that over so we have it clear. I move that we approve the Like to Bounce Corporation liquor license report of changes.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, next, the resolutions 02-2022 Board of Trustees resignation procedure. So we do have a red line copy of that as well as the final.
Mayor Bradford.
Yes.
Apologies for the interruption. Candy did not hear who seconded the motion.
Karen Budinger.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may,
Any
just a brief
questions or comments
introduction.
board on the changes?
Hold on, Mayor.
Madam Mayor, I was just a brief introduction on the resolution.
Oh, thank you, Jeff.
Sure, at the last meeting, there was a motion to make 2 changes to the draft policy. The motion was a little unclear whether it was to approve the resolution with those changes or just to make those changes and bring them back. And so they are back. Those were the changes per the motion at the last meeting. And I think that should capture everything and have that resignation procedure in place moving forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Conklin. All right, any questions from the board? All right, can I get a motion?
I move that we approve the changes in this resolution 2-2022.
All right, do I have a second?
Second?
All right, any comments from the public? All right, anything else from the board?
There's a public one.
Where?
They're having trouble hearing.
Oh, Karen made a motion.
Sorry. I
All
move
right.
that we approve this resolution with the changes.
Yeah, okay.
She seconded.
Anything else from the board?
I think there's some confusion in the public right now. We're talking about the procedures for a trustee to resign.
Yeah,
And we're ready to adopt the resolution for 2022, and that's what Karen made the motion on.
Yeah,
I hope that helps.
all right. All right, all in favor, we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 02-2022. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, now we have our public hearing. So we are going to go into our public hearing. This is for the rezoning application at 1375 3rd Street. Okay, I'm opening the hearing. Ms. Ferguson, your presentation, please.
Included in the packet is the rezoning application for 1375 3rd Street. as well as the documents that were provided to the Planning Commission and the Planning Commission recommendation. The notice of public hearing for the board meeting did not attach, only the public hearing notice for the Planning Commission meeting attached. But the notice of public hearing for the board meeting was published in the Delta County Independent March 16th. And of note, also noted on the agenda summary form is that the heading calling for special review variance request for a rezoning application was incorrect. The section stating special review variance should have been omitted. It was a notice of public hearing, but also noted in the verbiages that it states public meeting. So minor corrections that will be made to the template moving forward. Staff recommends the approval of the application. The lot does adhere to requirements to be rezoned from a commercial lot to an R1 lot, which is the request from the applicants. There is an existing standby water tap in place and there are no issues with sewer. The sewer line is already there. All that would need to happen is a connection to the town sewer line once the building takes place. So have any questions? If there's any questions.
Yeah, okay, so is the applicant here?
Yes, we're here.
Yes.
There you are.
How about you come up and if you would like to add anything to Ms. Ferguson's presentation, this is your chance. Go for it.
I don't.
Okay. All right, do we have any questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Not a question for you, but going through the information I received, I see under the required application materials, there's a $500 non-refundable application fee. And I don't know if this is the appropriate time to bring this up or not, but do we know how many hours it takes to review this? And it just seems like $500 is kind of excessive. So that's my comment.
All right, thank you. Anything else from the board? All
It
right,
has to go through the planning commission as well,
right,
for the
yes,
hours though.
yeah. So that's part of it. It goes to the planning commission as well as goes to the,
There's posting, newspaper.
right. Yeah, there's lots of postings and other things to get involved.
So we should be able to figure out what that cost is and see if this is reasonable
Yeah.
cost or not.
We can look at it,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay. All right, if we have no more questions, public comment? Rules for public comment, 3 minutes for each speaker. Speakers shall come forward to the podium and identify themselves by name and address. Repetitious comments will not be acceptable. If a previous speaker has already made your point, you may simply come forward and state that you concur. No public demonstrations of any kind, applause or otherwise, will be permitted or tolerated. All right, anyone from the public would like to comment on this? Yes, Ms. Watson.
Suzanne Watson. So I suppose the board has gone by and looked at the site, but I do want to say it makes sense to make that R1. I think the C1 was a bit of a spot zoning at the time that the master plan was adopted because of what was in the area. But truly, it almost doesn't make sense to have too much commercial up there, and it definitely, in my opinion, residential is the best choice. R1 is the best choice for that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, seeing none, I am going to close this hearing. This means if there are any other questions or whatever.
We had a letter of support from a neighbor also as
Okay.
part of the packet, just to recognize that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to close this hearing. All right, it's up to the Board of Trustees. Do we have any discussion on this? Yes.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to comment that this has been reviewed by the planning commission in the past, and I don't see any problems with moving forward with the change.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
No, I had questions and Corinne answered them
Okay.
here in the meeting.
All right. All right, then,
I move that we approve the application.
okay. She moved that we approve the application.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Can I have a second?
A second.
Don't you
No.
close the hearing?
I did. I already closed the hearing.
Sorry.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. You are resigned.
Mayor.
Yes.
Also, I apologize, I should have included this on here as well, but the next step is actually, if I would recommend that the board direct the town attorney to draft an ordinance modifying the rezoning, you do have to pass the rezone by ordinance. So the ordinance would be at the next meeting.
Okay. All right, can we get a motion to have the attorney draft an ordinance for this rezoning?
And I can assist with that. I can provide him the template and he can stamp it.
Yes.
Is that every?
Rezone,
Okay.
not every
No, not it.
hearing,
Does it
just
require
a
a motion?
rezone. Well, no,
No.
it doesn't. We can just direct Mr. Conklin to go ahead and do
Let's
that.
just do that.
You understand what's on your plate, sir?
I do. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. All right, then.
Thank you.
All right. We are finished with the hearing. Let us move on to news business. New, Town of Paonia, North Fork Pool Park Recreation District updated agreement regarding the existing Paonia skate park. Ms. Ferguson.
Yes, so the representatives for the Pool Park and Rec District were at the last meeting. Sorry. This
Got
will
3
be you.
minutes, Kurt.
I always keep it under 3 minutes.
18 hours and 56.
So they presented at the last meeting the updated lease agreement, as well as I provided a copy of the previous lease agreement that the town had with the North Fork Park and Rec District for the existing skate park. So what's in the packet is exactly that, and there's very minor modifications. This was provided to me by the Pool Park and Rec, that's why it's not a red line, I do apologize for that. And following acceptance of this agreement, which puts them back as the maintaining the existing skate park, the next step will be an additional agreement before the board to have the North Fork Pool Park and Rec District work as the administrator for grants with Jay Canode and his volunteer group on the approved new skate park extension. So that is what's in front of you.
Okay, any questions from the board? Yes.
I have 2 questions that are, the first one is, that says that if the sign needs to be replaced, the town will do it. Does the sign need to be replaced?
No.
I've not gone and looked at the sign, all right. And secondly, with this new agreement, the town is now responsible for fixing damaged fencing and concrete damage. Previously, the,
Pool Park and Rec.
yeah, the other folks did it, but we're now taking on that project. I
The
mean,
district
taking on-
was responsible for it in the agreement, but town staff is the one who did any repairs to the fence and things. So this reflects what was actually happening.
Okay, other questions from the board? Seeing none, any questions from the public? Yes, Ms. Patterson.
Thanks, Michelle Pattison, 302 Second. When I was a board member, it would have been extremely helpful to see agreements like this. It looks like this has been expired for 2 years. I had no idea. So I would love to see the board take some action to make sure that any agreements you've entered into are tracked and communicated, so that you're aware and for new board members as well.
Thank you. Anything else from the public? All right, seeing none, can we get a motion to approve this?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve the updated contract with Pool Parks and Rec for the skate park.
All right, second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second to approve the updated agreement with the North Fork Pool Park and Rec and for the existing skate park. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. Next up is SGM Engineering Contract Review. Randy?
I don't know if Corinne was.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Just-
60.
Yes. Yes, start.
Apologies. The first item is, we've had multiple conversations about entering into a contract agreement with SGM for general engineering services. These would be things, he can probably give you better examples, but I call and speak with Brandon pretty frequently with just simple questions. Most recent was speaking with him about the information that I provided to the board about the upcoming discussion on the Turner Ditch habitat. Had a general engineering question for him was, do you foresee any issues with, if the state goes to an enclosed system, will we have any issues if we've done this habitat area with the installation of an enclosed system? Things like that. Those are real general, not specific projects that require an intense amount of time. So in front of you, this is actually something that's been talked about for probably 3 years. I believe it started in 2019. A conversation about entering into a general contract service with an engineer. And so we work with a lot of engineers. This does not tie us to only working with one engineer. It just puts a contract in place. And what it does provide the town is a tie-in and a lock into the rates that are the current rates for SGM, which over a multiple year contract would provide a discount to the town as those rates are reassessed and increased on a consistent basis. So that would be my 2 cents, and I turn it over to Brandon to add anything additional.
Brandon.
Thank you. Yes, we've done work in the town for many years. A lot of it has been, we provide a proposal based on a bid or a project that just the town needs help with. This doesn't replace that, because this is like Corinne said, this would just be for, general things that come up. You want us to review, like Corinne said, the Turner Ditch, what they're looking at the wastewater plant. You want us to look at subdivision review, that could fall under this. Any specific projects, say, like I've got a couple more, like the construction standards, those would be separate proposals. I would still give you numbers for those, so it wouldn't affect this general engineering contract. This just allows you guys to have engineering advice for whatever pops up with not having, a proposal in front of you that takes another 3 weeks to get approval and get contracts moved on that. So this would allow some quicker decisions, quicker discussions. And as I've told Corinne in the past, SGM is not out to nickel and dime any client. So if Corinne calls and it's a 15-month conversation, I'm gonna just, I'll deal with that. If it's longer and stuff needs to, I need to provide a written response and stuff like that, that's when this would be used. So that's background for what this engineering, we do town engineer contracts. Jeff can probably speak to it as well. We do town engineer contracts all over the valley, all over the state with different entities. And they typically run on a, 3 to 5 years, and then it's renewed or it's not renewed, or it can be canceled at any time. The locking it in for 3 or 4 or 5 years is a rate. Like Corinne said, it's a rate thing. So that's the added discussion I have for you guys.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions for either Brandon or Corinne from the board? Yes.
Both of you, SOL. One thing that I'm concerned about, I'm trying to be sensitive to the comment that earlier about making decisions that would obligate the incoming board. And I think that there's some question about, this isn't a retainer, so we're not obligating that. And I do understand the need for consultation with an engineer that just crops up as you go through projects. But I really think that'd be good if the new board isn't fully supporting that rather than the school supporting it. So I'd move that we continue this to the next meeting.
Okay, do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
All right, any other comments from the board? Yes, Mr. Johnson.
If that's the case, then items 8, 9, and 10 should also be extended to the next meeting.
Or everything else.
Or continue to the next
Motion we adjourn?
This is like a Supreme Court.
This is-
It's too close to
yeah.
election.
This is
Ridiculous.
true.
Those are big decisions.
If I may.
Yeah,
I have some comments regarding this and then to add on to what trustee John said.
John, okay.
Did I get the right last name? Thank you. I actually have a couple questions about what you have in front of us. And so you had estimated $25,000 and was that for 12 months?
That's, yeah, and that was just a number. I mean, it's not, given, knowing the history over here, it's not, I don't anticipate that number being approached at any fashion. Because if it's I'll use the construction standards because that's in there and we'll talk about that if we're going to talk about it. That's a specific number. So if there's a specific project, I'm gonna give you a specific budget for that project. And that would be there. That wouldn't be coming out of the general engineering budget. So I don't anticipate that 25 being totally used unless there's a lot of stuff going on in the town.
Okay, thank you. My other question is what is, you have titled yourself a project engineer, but there is no project engineer in your price
Sure.
list.
And
Are you a principal?
I am a principal.
engineer?
I can change that, yes. And that's just because I used one that I previously had. I am a principal at SGM. I'm an owner at SGM. So yeah, I'm one of the responsible parties.
Which leads me into another question. So would we anticipate that you would be the one at $211 an hour that would do this work?
I'm not 211, no.
Oh, you're not 211? Oh, I'm sorry, I just went for the highest.
No, yes, I'm a principal, but I don't bill at a 211 rate. That's all, I bill at a senior 2, 182 is my billing rate.
You're a senior too, okay, $182, thank you. That's important to know. The other question is when you came and gave us a presentation on the SGM capital report, you mentioned the GIS information that we saw. So now, are you still helping the town with GIS entry?
We are as they come up, yes.
And how are you billing for that in the absence of this agreement? If you are still doing the GIS, or are you training staff?
So we have there's other staff that I'm, because I'm not the GIS person in SGM. There is a separate, we have 2 guys in our GIS department that bill, and it's one of the GIS CAD numbers. Let me see.
141, 121, 110.
Yeah, and that would, so most of that stuff would be in the 121 range is where, his name's Nick. Nick would bill in the 121 range is where most of that work would come out of. And Steve, our senior GIS person, he has occasional hours where he reviews it to make sure that what Nick has been told to put in there is accurate. And so most of the GIS work would be at a 121 rate.
Okay, thank you. So which then, I know you have been doing that probably since we had our presentation. How have you been billing the town for that time?
Right now, I've been holding it.
So you've not been billing for that GIS work?
Not yet, no.
Okay, and are we good, if we were to accept this, would we allow an arrears billing after the?
So I've just got it,
prior to?
I've just held what we've done at this point. I've held in terms of, I haven't sent you guys an invoice yet.
But I'm just wondering, under what contract are you invoicing
That's
the town?
still part of the contract that's open for the GIS project that was from end of 2019.
Okay.
Or 2020.
Yes, it closes May 31st of this year.
Yes, so I will have it, we'll be done with that part of it. And then any ongoing services after that would be separate.
And is that posted on Municodes, that particular contract? I just don't remember. You had posted some SGM contracts.
I believe it is.
Okay, and I apologize, I just don't remember that one jumping out at me, but that would be good to,
Well, I'd have to double check as well, but I
And we are, so,
because that's my ignorance that I,
Yeah.
either I missed it or I don't know.
and I will say, we're under budget on that project for, I could pull up the spreadsheet. I'll say 8, 9, 10 grand we're under.
And that is my opening to reiterate the need for us to have how much has been spent. And I said it 3 meetings ago, since November 1st, for all of this information that we've been paying to various contractors and vendors for our water system. So please, We need that, and I would like to make a motion, we have a special meeting to address our budget. So that's an aside, but it's really important because we are looking at all these contracts and we do not know. I know we have overspent already based on what we received last meeting. I think we are being asked to spend more money and we don't know if we have the money to spend. So I'm quite concerned that we have not seen what I asked for, which was a spreadsheet of what we have spent. I don't think I should have to go through the disbursements and pick it out myself. So I really would like to see that, and if we need a motion, I would like to make it, because we're not getting action. And secondly, we are not a rich town and we're doing these as sole source. So I'm concerned about that. This one, I understand SGM's has such intimate knowledge of the town, but for doing SOPs, I'm not sure that has to be a sole source with SGM. And because of that, I do feel like it's important the new set of trustees have more budget information where we have no budget or are over budget for 2 months in, based on the information I got at the March 24th meeting. I feel like this is not the time to obligate us to potentially 3 different contracts. So.
Okay. Yeah.
If I may, so some of that information is not accurate. We did respond to your email, but it was today when we were able to respond to those specific questions. So I'm just letting you know that it was the information that was provided was almost a complete first quarter. It was through March 18th. It was not only January, February for the numbers, and so some of that information is not. There are areas that we do think that we have that there's a potential for overspending, but the percentages that you look at when you look at first quarter are not indicative of a completely blown budget, because we have our budget, when you look at first quarter, often looks extremely top heavy because of the annual renewals and the first beginning of the year things that we do, like renewing our insurance, renewing memberships, large orders of chemicals and supplies and things that we do right at the beginning of the year. Not disagreeing with any requests or anything that's being made, just providing that information. And also, I don't want things to get out of control, but you're accurate. We didn't take direct action at what your request was, because the staff, the direction given to me is given by the board, not individual people. So we did put together, though, an answer to the questions that you asked in your email.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
It may be easier to retrieve the numbers, since a lot of the payments we had to make were after January. So beginning in this fiscal year going forward, I think what gets complicated is when we start pulling a previous fiscal year into the total, because that November, December wasn't heavy expenditures. In the area we're worried about was when SSG was here and Josh and all that stuff was happening. I think that's when we want to know what's happening with water, and how much are we spending on the water? And I agree.
Yeah, and we don't carry over from, November and December. I mean, that's last year's budget. It's closed out, it's done, and we move forward with what we've got.
Thank you, I appreciate that. We have not seen the end of year budget table like we normally do, that I mentioned in my email with the multiple columns. I think that's important, that we see what we had left at the end of budget. And I have to be quite honest, what I really wanted to say is, I wanted to know how much we spent since the day Travis resigned. That's really what I want to know. Because we're in we are here where we are because of his leaving and leaving us with a disaster. So I was just trying not to be so pointed, but I will be pointed right now. So whatever that date was, December 14th. We need to know, because we are just shaking our heads yes to a lot of spending. Thank you.
January 14th.
In the absence of seeing the email, which is very unfortunate that it was so close to the meeting, and I'm very concerned about us obligating more money for the next set of trustees or ourselves. Do I need to make a motion for a special work session meeting for the budget?
I would suggest.
You're in the middle of a motion right now.
Oh, we are?
It made a motion.
Well, we're still in the discussion of that.
But I can't motion over a motion, can I?
Right.
Okay, sorry.
So we're going to finish this up. So,
I made a motion to, I was thinking of item 7, but I was also sensitive to trustee Johnson's comment that there's several items here that come under that category, so I'll withdraw my motion at this point.
Okay, all right. So, my suggestion would be, let's see end of years, or from December 14th. Let's see where we're at. No, it would be December 14th when Travis resigned. So let's see where we're at. And then if we need to sit down and have a special meeting after we have those figures, then let's sit down and have a special meeting.
Fair enough.
But let's get those figures first.
So, I don't know what's in the email.
Right.
So it's not gonna be from December 14th, probably.
January 14th.
Okay,
He did not leave until, his last day was January 12th.
Okay, so it'd be-
January 14th.
Okay.
So just
Thank
this
you.
year's figures.
thank you, I'll go with that.
Yeah,
That sounds good, so we need to have that email, or, let me just continue with it. Would you like us to comment on this email as trustees, so it can be provided in the next agenda with some of the bugs worked out, if there are bugs?
What we can do is provide you the end of year as requested and get that start and updated information, but it won't be until the first meeting in May.
Okay.
We have, the auditors will be in office next week and doing that, and I want to make sure that there's enough time to adequately focus on the auditors in office next week, and then the following week, it would be unlikely that Cindy would have the time to complete that accurately in time to get it in the packet. So I would request that the board give us till the first meeting in May.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion,
okay,
since we do not have one on the floor.
Right.
Correct?
correct.
I would like to make a motion that we continue this particular proposed contract, and we also continue the contract for the multiple SOPs until
Okay.
the meeting where we will have the budget figures in front of us.
Do you want the proposal for engineering services included in that as well?
I meant the one we're on now, which is.
So
let's see.
7, 8, and 9?
Well, I would like us to talk about and this is just my opinion, about the SOP for the construction standards.
All right,
I'm wondering if that isn't worthy of discussion right now, or with a new set of trustees in the absence of numbers, maybe all three should be continued like Dave had originally proposed.
well, do you want to then include, we have an annual service contract with Filter Tech. I mean, that doesn't need to be renewed.
Yeah, I didn't have my focus on that one, but 7, 8,
Yeah,
and
so
9.
7, 8, and 9, okay.
But I'm a little concerned about not getting that construction SOP started. But, go ahead.
And we do not have an annual contract with Filter Tech. This is to
Oh, this is
start an
initiate.
annual. Yes.
Okay, well then maybe that needs to get pushed off till the next trustees as well.
So, and I apologize if I may. I just want to, I do want to add though that some of these are directly related to the fact that we have new people in and new staff. And so I understand what we're talking about when we're talking about general contracting. That's not something that's very specific. These are, I'm going to still call Brandon and ask him questions while the board discusses these items. And I promise not to make them 15 months long conversations. But there are things like Filter Tech where we pay them already to come and do certain services. It's very as needed. They come and they calibrate things and we pay, like I said, it could be upwards $7,000, $8,000 a year to do that. But what this contract does, it just ties into a 1 year, or it could be the rest of this fiscal calendar year until December, to have them come on a monthly basis in tandem with our staff that's working in the plants, checking those things, continuing to check the maintenance and things that are being done with our ORC and our staff to make sure that all the bugs that were there are continuing to be worked through. And so I do think that would be one that is worth discussion.
All right, so you want to make a motion then just to continue items 7, 8, and 9?
Correct. I move that we continue discussion of items 7, 8, and 9 until the first meeting in May.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Pink.
I'm concerned about the SOPs because I think that helps the staff so much in understanding what they're supposed to do on a day-to-day basis, that it's not a huge contract, and I think it's so helpful for the staff that it would be good to, pardon me?
If I can just get a clarification, are you referring to
Item 8.
the long list of SOPs that JDS had on the back page of their report, which I believe, I don't know if you were looking at that many SOPs in that contract. And then there's the one for construction.
So, okay,
All right.
just
We
to
better-
clarify, I know it's different items here, but just so that we can get it all clear. I have no problem with you guys pushing off the general contract, that's fine, it's been that way, we've operated that way, that's fine. 7 is just, or 8 is the.
Wastewater.
Wastewater.
Okay, so 8 is the water and wastewater, that's just the standard operating procedures for the facilities. So how to run, your daily operations, what equipment checks you're doing, all that stuff. That's what 8 is. That's that's what Josh and Brianna were saying that they needed. I'm not sure what you're.
This is the back page of the JDS report where they have like a dozen bulleted SOPs needed. I didn't know if you were working from this.
I think that's similar, Trustee Smith. Yes, I did look at that. So some of that would be, yes, encompassed in this. They had a few more, I believe, and I'll double check while we do something else here. So that's what that one was for. Number 9, just so that we're all clear. 9 was just the construction and standard drawings, tech specs, if you will, or engineering specs for water and sewer infrastructure, just so that we're all clear. Does that help?
If I may?
Yes.
Sorry to be dominating this, but in reading all 3 of these, I was a little concerned that you did not identify by name the list of SOPs you're going to work on.
It was just for the water and wastewater treatment facilities.
And I don't know what that means. Is
So
that
that's
one
the
SOP?
water plant, that's both water plants and the wastewater plant, that's it.
And it's the SOP for just operating those?
That's what SOP is, that's a
Right,
standard.
no, I know that,
Yeah.
but the SOP is a subject matter. So you were saying it was for the maintenance of each of those. None of those actually are on this list.
It's the operation.
Yeah, which are not SOPs that were recommended by
It's a
JDS.
little different than what
Okay.
JDS had.
Okay, and I agree, those are really important to have as well. But I don't know if we need to sole source those. I just don't, and I have to be honest, I'd like to see an SOP you've written before and as part of a contract, so I understand what we're paying for me personally. I didn't have an example to look at, so I felt like I didn't quite know what it was we were gonna hire you to do. So I'm just gumming up the works, but these are questions that I think are really important. This is important work to get done, and we need to be careful about our spending and make sure we are going and doing the highest priority by everybody's opinion.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the table to continue, yeah.
Just one other comment.
Yeah,
Item number 8, the standard operating procedures, I believe that is required by state law, isn't that right?
You're supposed to have them at each plant, yes.
So it's got to be done. So that's my comment.
yes, Ms. Ferguson.
I just wanted to add that when Brandon was here representing, I apologize, Mayor, I'm distracted. When Brandon was here representing SGM at the time that the board asked him to provide the cost for the water and wastewater SOPs, he provided at that time the links and information to a set of SOPs that he had written, or that SGM had written and provided for another community. He gave it at the meeting. He provided it at the meeting where you could go to reference and see where those are at. So that information was provided verbally in person. It was not in a packet, but it can be provided so that you can see that example.
Okay. So we still have a motion to continue 7, 8, and 9. We don't have a second on that motion. Can we get a second on that motion?
To continue it? I second.
All right. Further discussion from the board at all? No? Okay, from the public? Yes, Ms. Patsy.
So I have two comments. The first, I feel like you've just glossed over the fact that staff just told you that they can't provide accurate end-of-year budget numbers until 5 months into the new year. Is that acceptable to you as a board? I think that's something worth giving a little more thought. Second comment, I think SGM may do just the best work in all of the country, but we're not following our purchasing policy. We're not even talking about the purchasing policy other than page. I think that has to at least factor in, if this is gonna be sole source, why is it? What's the justification? Why is that not in the package when you're talking about contracts? Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes. Ms. Jones.
So I have provided budget to actual. I'm saying that I cannot provide in the format that you're asking for until I finish the audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the public? Yes, Mr. Burke.
So I would echo the purchasing policy requires competitive bids. I don't understand why these things aren't going to a competitive bid. If there's one item in there, the SOPs that are critical to do now, I would understand the board making a motion to exempt itself in this item from its purchasing policy and do what you have to do. But generally, you should follow your purchasing policy unless you're conscious that you're not and you have some reason to do that. Competitive bids are important. These are no bid, unsupervised, cost plus projects. And as someone who's lived my whole life on competitive bids that are fixed price, I don't understand why the town works this way. I really don't. But anyway, going down to what's actually here, some comments on the actual contract. There's a clause in there that gives the company total control of all the materials that they generate. And I would ask you to, and this is a standard contract that the contractor is offering, and that's a good place to start. But these things are open to negotiation. I'm afraid that their ownership of these materials can run afoul of Cora. We've got an ordinance that you guys passed just a couple of weeks ago that says that the people of the town under Cora have access to everything that this town pays for and does with water and infrastructure and finance. And so I think that particular clause should be discussed, and we should make sure that all of this stuff is available under Cora. And then there's a liability exemption in there. They're limiting their liability to $50,000 or the amount paid to them. And I don't understand that one either. I'm a contractor. I work on architectural things, and I have to have a $2 million liability policy to hang a pot rack in somebody's kitchen, okay? And I don't have any risk at all that I'm gonna blow up the town's water system, or the town's water system's gonna blow up because of some number I get wrong. So again, I think this is something that should be open to negotiation. I don't know what's standard across the industry, but I think they're getting away with something. Or you're giving away something, I should say, if there isn't even a discussion about this. Especially when you come down to no bid, unsupervised, cost plus contracts, you should get bills on a weekly basis or some regular schedule. This business of I'm holding the bill, maybe that's fine, but it's not regular as far as business goes. There should be a schedule for billing on these contracts. As far as
Your time is almost up, Mr.
what's been provided to a trustee, there's a new policy, a new ordinance that gives trustees access to all the records of the town. This is not something at the discretion of the staff.
Mr. Bruner. Thank you. You may please sit down. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I believe we were discussing whether or not item 7, and the comments are valid, like I'm not in disagreement at all with what's being said, but if we're moving 7, 8, and 9 to the new trustees, then maybe we should hold our public comment for that board to
Correct.
hear and review.
Correct.
So did we have a motion on?
We have a
moving-
motion and we have a second. So now I was asking for public comment. Yes, Ms. Watt.
Suzanne Watson. So I'd like to suggest, we're looking at what, 2 to 4 weeks of holding off. That's not a lot of time when you consider how long we've gone, since Travis has gone. The state isn't gonna come down and arrest you and put you in jail because they wanna see us succeed. And there's help with CDPHE. If you go to their website, I'm sure it's simplistic, but there is there is information explaining what SOPs are. I think it would be good for a board to educate themselves a little bit about that, so, and there are examples from other cities. But I'd also like to suggest, we don't have a lot of money, and there's no end of projects that are gonna be available for the engineer. If it's not this one, there's gonna be another one and another one. They're just stacked up. But what I'd like to see is us being able to do it as economically as possible when we have a chance. And when we have an organization like the Colorado Rural Water Association, I'd like to maybe see us turning to them to say, we need to do SOPs. What do you suggest? Just for that advisement that they can give us. He could be advising the town administrator. They have many people in that organization. And perhaps they could help us find the most cost-effective way to go about this. And they might say, sure, yeah, just hire an engineer for everything. But they also might actually have people, professional staff that can help us at no cost at all. So I think it would be good to explore that option first before we just commit ourselves to more contracts here. And I do believe the next board should land on its feet, hit the ground running and take this on, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the public? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second to continue items 7, 8, and 9. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right, next up is the action item for Filter Tech, the annual service contract. Ms. Ferguson has already laid that out. Discussion from the board about entering into the annual service contract? Yes.
Seriously, no one else? Can I go? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just get to that. Let me get to the page. So my question was, are there things we are gonna be hiring Filter Tech to do that the ORC could be doing? And that, let me scroll down to,
So we have
and this also leads in, if you could upload the contract with Mr. Archuleta to,
Yes.
that would be good, because I don't know what his contract says, so I'm sort of speaking in the dark. But it seemed like there are things here that the ORC would be able to do, and I don't, I'm just wondering, are we paying someone to do something that we're already paying someone to do?
I need to go back and look and compare this specific to that from, because I've had this for a few days, so it's, I'd have to go back and look at them and compare them to know if there's specific. I don't want to say no and then have there be a specific item on here. So I can tell you that there are certain items on here that they wouldn't be doing for the full year because our staff is already trained with them on how to do it, but they hadn't at the time that the contract proposal was written, so.
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
I have two questions. One is, it seems like a contract like this would be driven by the SOPs on how to run this facility that we're hiring someone to run here through this contract. And so it feels like the SOPs should come and inform a contract like this. That's one comment. The second is, question, are the projects that are listed in the scope of work, are they in line with the priorities that have been listed in the engineers' reports that we've received in the recent past? Those are my two questions.
Ms. Ferguson, do you have any answers to those?
I would say they are definitely in line with the priorities. This is very specific to making sure that all of the different components in the facility, in the 2 million water treatment facility are properly maintained and are operating correctly. And I'm sorry, could you repeat your first question?
Well, what I really feel like is we do need the scope of work, or the SOPs, excuse me. We need a document like that to run these facilities for our town. And we just put that off. But I feel like that SOP document would really be what would drive and inform a contract like this. And so I'm just wondering if it's appropriate for us to move. I know we need this work done, we need our water. It just feels like we're spiraling a little bit on, we have needs that aren't being met, and some of them we're creating by pushing them off, and I understand the reasoning, but it's a little frustrating to see us in this situation where we need SOPs to inform this contract, and we're trying to pass the contract before we have a document.
Some of these items will continue. They're already coming and calibrating the system every 3 months. There are some things that are already happening, and they would continue. I don't want to insinuate that I think this is urgent and you need to make a decision this moment. Again, some of these things are things that I started to put in place and request that we look at when we were really up in the air about what was going to happen when our ORC departed, and we're bringing in staff and changing from one ORC who was with the town for a month and a half and then moving to another ORC. So I do think that there's benefits to having the person who built and designed your system and your plant in there telling you, yes, this is. An ORC can come in and they may be able to do these things, but I do think it's very helpful to have the people who designed it and constructed it, created it, be the one that says this is the right way to do it. These are what you need to do in these different locations and with these different pumps and different systems. But I don't want the board to feel that this is something that they have to make a decision on this moment. I have requested also from our public utility focused public works staff their opinion as well, because they are above and beyond doing an excellent job and educating themselves. And I've asked them, do you see things in here that they don't need to do? Can you provide that update? And that is something they're working on. We just didn't have it prior to the packet.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask?
Yes.
May I continue? Thank you. So my first question then is, can we move forward as we are now without this contract and have adequate, safe drinking water? Or do we need a contract like this in the near future in order for that to occur?
Yes, we can, and I do think that it would be important to continue to evaluate and that we may need a contract in the near future.
Second is just a comment, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, which is a statement that you just made kind of spurred this thought on me, which is, it seems like maybe this company should be involved in the creation or have an opportunity to be involved in the creation of the SOPs to run this facility if they're the ones that designed it. And so that's all I have to say.
Okay.
So Jeff, just to throw that in there, yes, I mean, if SGM, that's what we'd be doing. We'd be grabbing Filter Tech to help at least get information from, to be part of that SOP. That's what you need, that's what you want. So the things like in here that says confirm chlorine pump operation, well, there'd be a brief SOP of how to operate the chlorine pump. And that would be and what you check. And so yes, you'd be using manufacturer data, which Filter Tech's the manufacturer of the membrane system. And that's how you start SOPs, and that's what you get down to that nitty-gritty detail.
Yeah, Mr. Jones, do you want to say something else, Mr.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
If I might?
Yes.
I just want to throw this out, that because I went to the water treatment plant, I understand 60% of what is being asked here. And that is my premise. It just buttresses how important it is for all of the trustees to visit all these plants. Because I get it, because Josh did such a good job of his tour. So I'm just plugging our number 14 item. Thank you.
In
All right.
advance.
All right. Okay, well, would somebody like to make a motion then on the Filter Tech contract?
I move that we continue with it, that we approve an annual service contract with Filter Tech.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table to approve an annual service contract with Filter Tech. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion from the board? Yes, Mr. Thompson?
Well, minor modification would be that we don't currently have a contract with Filter Tech to do this work. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So this would be a first time.
Yep. Yes.
There used to be one. It hadn't been renewed for several years.
And this would only go till December.
It would, I'm redoing the math right now to give you an accurate number.
Okay. All right, anything else from the board? Yes.
I would just like to think about modifying that motion so that this could be revised, because Corinne just said she's been talking to the staff, and there's some of these things they can do. And unless they need Filter Tech to show them how to do it, and there's some reason to include it, and modify that in the wording of the contract, if they can do some of these things and you have confidence in them, I would ask that this be reduced to those things that can only, and that would have to come at a later meeting, I think,
Right.
unless you have this. But I don't want to pay for something our staff could do.
So
Yes, Ms. Murphy.
knowing that, my recommendation would be, so doing the math for the 8 months basically that would be left in a year at the time of execution of the agreement would be just over $10,000. If the board wanted to approve this evening, my recommendation would be that they approve it not to exceed the $10,000, and then I will bring back to the board the report from the staff on the items that would be removed and what that modification would be. Because it's up to billed on a monthly basis, we would not pay, well, I see what you're saying as well. Now that I'm thinking through it, I don't really want to tie into a monthly installation fee.
Yeah, what if there was a way to itemize the billing versus having a fixed monthly fee based on services provided?
I can go back and ask them to do that.
Okay. Ms. Smith?
That seems like a reasonable compromise. So what do we do in the motion?
I was gonna say, yeah, I was just trying to figure out what we're gonna do as far as the motion goes. Maybe the best thing is to just do a whole new motion.
Do you want to withdraw, Karen?
Yeah, withdraw the motion and then we'll just,
And I was a second, so I'll agree with the withdrawal.
okay, so the
Madam
motion
Mayor.
has been withdrawn. So
Madam Mayor,
maybe
if I-
the new motion should be
If I
that,
may, okay. Sorry, if I may,
Oh, thank
just,
you. oh,
is
you're,
it-
you're muted.
can you hear me? I'm unmuted, I think.
Yes,
Okay, just a follow up to this discussion, and this kind of ties in with some of the discussion from the prior agenda items. One thing that I had discussed with Corinne was preparing a professional services agreement for the town to utilize for contracts such as this. And what we have here is more of a proposal than a contract, and a proposal like this could be attached as an exhibit to the form contract, with the contract being the controlling terms. And one of the standard terms that we typically use in that contract is the right of the town to omit any services within the proposal in its discretion. So that would be just one circumstance where it might address one of the particular concerns that I've heard here. And so one thing that I can do is put together that form and get that into place for the town for when it is contracting for services such as these. I just thought that might be an appropriate place to interject that here. We just haven't had an opportunity to actually address it and put it into place so far.
Okay, thank you. So, it seems like the annual service contract is not gonna stand the way it is, because the
Of staff-
services,
staff
yeah,
input.
right, so it seems like it's not ready for us to vote on, actually, at this point in time. Yes, Mr. Thompson?
I also want to reiterate something that our attorney just said, which is this is a proposal and not written as a contract directly. So I don't know that it's something that we could approve as a contract at this time regardless.
Okay. All right. So maybe we are then done with this agenda item and we should move on. How does the board feel about that? Yes, Mr. Thompson?
May I make a motion that we take a 10-minute recess? at
Oh, sure,
7:45?
absolutely, we could do that.
Do
All
I
right,
need to make a motion to do that?
please do.
Okay.
You made a motion. Do I have a second to take a 10-minute recess?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're out of here until 7:55. Resolution 05-2022 Emergency Response Authority Designee Update. We have our designee, the head of our emergency response team, has since retired a long time ago. This was supposed to be updated, I believe, 3 years ago, and it was not done. So now we are in arrears and need to have this designated. Am I correct in that, Ms. Ferguson?
Yes.
Yes.
Many communities need to do an update.
Right, yeah.
Fire department has decided they don't want to operate.
Right, and this was brought to the attention of everyone at the municipal quarterly, and so we are not the only community in this. Yeah, we're not the only one. So anyhow, and the person who is our designee is no longer with the town, so we need to appoint somebody else. And I believe we have looked at the chief of police to do that.
That's standard and
Yeah.
what other communities have put in place.
Yeah, we don't have.
So it says
Well, we
chief of
will
police
shortly.
order
It'll be our
designee, so
sergeant,
the next,
but,
it would be our sergeant.
Yeah, in absence of the police chief. All right, can we get a motion to designate at this point, it would be our chief of police as our emergency response authority designee, and that position will be filled by our sergeant until we get him chief of police.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve Resolution 05-2022 Emergency Response Authority Designee Update, signifying that the Chief of Police will be our designee or the person next in the chain of command.
Thank you. All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion from the board? Yes, Mr. Thompson.
I would just like to state that for the county, the DERA is the county sheriff, so we're in line with what's happening locally. I have a question, which is, do we have any agreements for support from the county on emergencies of this nature?
Yes, we are part of the county emergency management plan and have frequent communication with Chris Stewart.
Thank you.
All right, anything else from the board? Yes.
I just had a question, what exactly this means. So, who's gonna call the chief of police? Who would be calling that person and saying
I
it's
think
emergency?
It's like an emergency spill, like there was a chemical spill or something like that. Then the police chief would then be the one that goes and designates and gets the other people to
To
come
show
in.
it.
Is that my
That's-
understanding, Mr.
Yeah, the
Thompson?
research that I did,
Yeah.
it's mostly about hazardous waste.
Oh,
Right,
And
yes.
the response to those kinds of situations.
Right.
So really DOT and CDPHE,
Or whoever our
the
local.
Department of Health would be the ones notifying people of the hazardous spill? Or would a
Probably.
community member?
It could be a community member, it could be a state patrolman who sees it on the highway.
Okay.
Something like that.
But it's mostly
Then
hazardous.
This is their contact person who then initiates the
Okay.
responses. Okay. Anything else from the board? All right, anything from the public? Yes, Ms. Watson.
Suzanne Watson. So do we have SOPs for the emergency plan? Does the county provide us with that? I mean, how does the next in command, I guess that's Patrick Hinyard, right? How does he know what procedure to follow when he's contacted? So I know we have SOPs for the police department, but does it include for the emergency management? And does the county help us with that?
Yes, we have an emergency coordinator from the county who coordinates all that stuff and provides that kind of information. Yeah.
And it's in our hazard mitigation plan.
Yeah, anything else from the public? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second to accept Resolution 05-2022. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. All right, we're up to a discussion item on the town attorney memo and recommendations regarding ordinance 01-2020. Mr. Conklin, put this in your court.
Thank you.
No?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as you have seen in the packet, I prepared a memo that at the board's direction provided my review and interpretation of the moratorium, and in particular, the scope of what that moratorium covers. And I won't read my memo here as part of my initial presentation, but there, in reviewing it, part of the reason for doing so and some of the concerns was, how are we interpreting this, and are we interpreting correctly, and how are we applying this? And one of the things in particular that has come up is whether or not the moratorium extends to preclude the extension of a service line on an already connected tap, among other issues. And based on how I read and interpret the moratorium, I don't find much support for that position. And I understand that there was some of the intent behind this ordinance, and that this is really to ensure that the town has a handle on its water supply before it's providing extension of delivery lines, selling more water taps, or over committing to to what it has a capacity to serve. And those are good, prudent things to have a handle on. And so and in particular, I want to say that Mr. Bruner was one of the petitioners on this ordinance, and has provided some comment on his intent and interpretation with the ordinance. And I really do appreciate all of the thought and analysis that's been provided, and the advocacy for it, that position. In my role, I don't find that as clear, and I don't reach the same conclusions. And based on my interpretation, it has created, I have some concerns about positions the town may or may not take, or actions the board may or may not take based on the moratorium. And so accordingly, there's easy ways to address these things, and those are laid out in my recommendations in the memo. In particular, if the intent and the desire of the board is to not allow for an expansion of service to an additional unit on a lot, there is an easy amendment to make that clear, which is to simply say that an additional water tap, the purchase of an additional water tap, is required for any for any new unit. And it's my understanding that at one point in time, the code may have required that, and it was later changed to simply require a meter for an additional unit rather than a tap, while at the same time still requiring the purchase of an additional sewer tap for that additional unit. And so my general recommendations are for the board to review, I guess, and consider this memo, and provide and consider whether or not they wish to make any amendments to the code to provide greater clarity on that issue in particular, or if there are any others they wish to address kind of within the scope of this same topic at that time. And then finally, to follow up and pursue a engineering report that analyzes the town's water supply and the limitations as is contemplated by the moratorium. I think that would be a prudent thing to have, and I know it's been discussed, but the time might be right now to pursue that. So with that, I think I'll stop, and I'm open to any questions and or comments.
Okay, thank you. Question for Mr. Conklin from the board?
I don't have questions, but
Yeah.
just because this is a discussion item,
No.
there's a couple things happening here. I think the ADU issue is one that we have not addressed. We're punting, and this is a way to begin that conversation. One thing with the recommendation of requiring a tap to the ADU that comes to my mind is I'm thinking about infrastructure, and do we want to, so when we get down the road, if we move in this direction, we're requiring a new tap, a physical tap into the city's water infrastructure in order to create ADUs. And so I just want to make that comment that if we go that route to honor the intent of the moratorium, we're creating some future infrastructure issues that we'll need to address. And I'm wondering whether we need more infrastructure in our water system right now. We have some pretty serious water infrastructure issues to address already. And so if we don't want to create more water infrastructure and honor the moratorium, there might be other things that we need to consider in order to address the issue of ADUs, accessory dwelling units, putting new additions onto the water system without a tap. So like, I'm starting to lose my messaging, I apologize. But I think the moratorium is we don't want to commit more water than it's already legally committed to our water taps. Right now there are issues with our code that allows for ADUs to be built without a tap. And if we adjust our code to require a tap in those situations, then we're creating more water infrastructure. And is that the resolution that we want to have?
Thank you.
If I may, just a quick follow-up to that.
Yes, please.
There's certainly a way to structure the water regulations and the water taps in a way that wouldn't require an additional physical connection for an additional unit on a lot. And you'll see in the use of an EQR metric, in that a water tap would be equal to from a use standpoint, one equivalent residential unit. And based on demands, there are different values of that EQR. And so for the addition of an ADU, or if there's multiple other units served by a single physical connection, it can still require the purchase of an additional water tap, but not a physical connection. It can be addressed in how you legally define and utilize those rights, basically.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments, questions? Yes.
Let's see, where do we start with this? I think it's getting a little overly convoluted unnecessarily, in my opinion. The moratorium was done to not add any extra pressure onto our water system. So no new taps can be added. I don't think the ADU thing, which I've taken from code, that if you add a new single household, it's subdivided, each unit erected on the new subdivided area must have a separate water line. I don't think we need to be talking about ADUs right now, because right now people can't do an ADU.
I believe in R2, you're allowed to run a line from your house to another unit without, like, in our current coding.
Well, I think then we need to do some new defining.
That's
Right.
Exactly.
But I don't know why is that the crux of this issue? It's not. People haven't been it just seems to me that we're not selling any more taps until the moratorium is lifted. Whether something needs a tap or not, that's how the code is set up. The issue is, can people be adding more water use to a building where that water use wasn't there before. And by creating, and I'm just gonna say Hayes Building, if they're adding 4 bathrooms to the Hayes Building, that's an extra pressure on the water system that wasn't being asked for when the moratorium went in place. So now we're splitting hairs on the wording in the moratorium of delivery line, which doesn't really comport with other definitions. That seems to be the issue, is that a delivery line is owned by the town, not the service line into the house. So the premise had been no more extension of service lines, no new taps. And that has fallen apart because of decisions that have been made. So to me, the point is, first of all, what do we need to do to lift the moratorium? What are you providing to JDS so the engineering study can be completed? That, again, is the elephant in the room.
Hey,
I mean,
not there, I will have you removed.
but that's the problem. We do not know what JDS needs and when are they gonna get it. Because this could become a moot issue very quickly if they can get the accurate information. So I'm saying to Corinne, what does JDS need and when are you gonna provide it?
JDS is receiving all the information they requested except information about the 1 million, which the town board has continued to state that they wanted the 1 million online and that information about the water through the 1 million provided. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, but this is absolutely board direction.
So what should it be?
They have the information about how much water the town receives to the 2 million, how much water the town receives through 1 meter that's functioning and 1 meter that is under repair at the 1 million, so that they then will know exactly how much water is coming in from the spring that feed the 1, and that's all that they need.
So
But
do you have it?
do I have what?
That information?
I don't have information from a broken meter. That's the piece of information that they still need, and it's one of the items that is being repaired by our new
So it's a
staff.
broken meter going into the 1 million from a particular spring.
Yes.
And because of that, there's no other way to
I cannot tell you.
estimate.
I've given them.
There's gotta be a better way. This is crazy.
So we discussed this at a previous meeting and I stated, and JDS stated, Brandon provided as well in that dual report, that JDS said, yes, we can get an idea and do some math to figure out based on usage and how much water is coming in, where you're at. And the board did not support them using that data. The ongoing historical, the board repeatedly has said, we want the 1 million online and we want that data coming in from the 1 million. That was where we thought we were headed. We found out that that was incorrect information. At that time, we presented to the board as well the fact that it costs more money to have both systems online, and it's not necessary to always have both systems fully online. At which time we started to back away from that a little bit because the board said, well, if we don't need to, why would we have to? Again, it was brought back up at a follow-up meeting and the board said, we want the 1 million online. So we get continually different messages from the board, but as far as the amount of water that is being brought into the plant, the amount of water that's being treated at the 2 million, the amount of water that we're selling, JDS is receiving that information.
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
So I think we have two issues here. We have the greater issue, which is what we're discussing now. And I'm fully in agreement that we should have a plan on lifting the moratorium. We should create a step action plan and get this done. What we're talking about with this agenda item is the short term. How do we get through the moratorium period under the letter of how this moratorium is written? How do we get through this until we get this thing lifted? And so we have two different things happening right here. And so I feel like we need to stick to the agenda item. I'm totally with you. I think our water board would be a great place to start on like, what are the steps we need to take? What kind of plan do we need to get the moratorium lifted? And then start checking those boxes. And if the target is moving, we need to stop moving the target and just start moving forward on that. But with this, it's like, we need to decide how we're going to interpret the language as it's written in this document, or make adjustments so that we can move forward with some of the projects that are happening. We just okayed a lot for residential use in our town that has a tap. If we don't interpret this, those folks are just sitting there with a lot and a tap.
No, they can use it. They
Okay,
can use that.
so they can extend a line from that tap to a new.
Right, correct.
Like, these are the questions that come up with the language for me. And so what I'd like us to do is focus on the agenda item and decide, or move down the road, this is a discussion item. We need to move down the road on how the language is interpreted so that the town can implement it, so that people can fix their houses and build houses and do what they need to do under the letter of the law or not. Well, these folks are gonna build a house on their new lot.
No new taps, and the moratorium is clear. Any
Right.
taps in existence can be put to use.
Right.
There can't be new taps since the moratorium.
That's,
So these folks that just got, are fine.
and I think that's what Jeff is trying to do, is provide some definitions. That's what we asked him to do, to clarify the language so that we can start making decisions to honor the moratorium and get past this thing.
And if I may, because I think where this kind of, the problem we're running into, where we kind of have a bit of a split, is that a tap under the code currently, an additional ADU or an additional unit that could be served by an existing tap would be permitted. And there's I think been some question as to whether that was, whether or not that should be, or whether or not the moratorium was intended to not offer that. And, a lot of this is definitional, and that is just kind of how coach, the structures of, the code works. And so I think through some tweaking, if that's the board's directions, through some tweaking of the definitions and minor changes to the code, that can be clarified and not be questioned, while the work can be done to then, lift the moratorium at the same time or in the future.
Thank you. My question, Mr. Conklin, so is the really sticky definition here the delivery pipe issue?
I don't think so, because I think if I were to redraft these definitions, I would do it a bit differently. But the delivery pipes was laid out in my memo, to the extension of town main lines delivery pipes, and not service lines. And so the extension of a town, and I guess I would say, I think the extension of a town delivery pipe on its own wouldn't necessarily result in greater, well, I guess if there was a tap that then could be existing tap that could then be connected to it, it might expand the water usage. But I think that part, if kind of rephrased, would be clear. I think to rephrase all of that, I think the delivery pipe wording relates to town main lines and not service lines. So I don't find that to be problematic.
So it's a service line issue then, not the delivery line.
Right, the extension of a service line from an existing tap.
Right, and that is not addressed in the moratorium at all. It's just a delivery line, correct?
Correct.
Am I reading it?
Correct.
So then we would need a definition of a service line.
Or a tweaking of these definitions to fit that scenario one way or the other, because an extension of a service line, I guess, could take a few different forms. One of it could be if somebody, remodels, has adds a bathroom to their home, and they need to extend a portion of the service line to the rooms in their home. That's one thing. If there's an extension of a service line from an existing tap to an additional unit, that might be another. But in both cases, those are things that would be permitted under the through the use of that existing tap.
Other comments from the board?
It's subject to the other limitations on taps in the code, but as a general matter.
Not yet. All right, Mr. Brewer, you have 3 minutes.
As the sponsor of this initiative, I'd ask the board's indulgence to waive the 3-minute limit, so I'm not fighting with Mary on that. Whenever you tell me to stop, I'll stop.
Then what does the board feel?
I think I can help.
How many minutes do you need?
I don't know, 5 or
Well-
6.
I'm just saying, maybe make a motion that Mr. Bruner can have 10 minutes to speak.
Do we have a second on that?
It's pretty simple. I'll second it.
All right, all in favor of Mr. Brewer having 10 minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, then, who's voted nay?
We had 3 nays.
We have 3 nays and I vote nay. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. First off, this board has the power in the ordinance to declare a moratorium on any part of the system at any time if you think it's worth it. So you don't have to mess around with splitting hairs. You can do what you think is right if you think this should be extended to some other thing. As far as the service lines go, first off, I had an attorney write this, and so I didn't really question his language in there, and now I can see where a couple of words were left out. But as far as the service line goes, I didn't define that very closely, because there's no way you can ethically deny someone with a tap the right to hook up. What the intent of this is that the town's not going to run a pipe, which someone that had been working for the town before would have done. Run a pipe out hither and yon in anticipation of when we're going to give some developer the right to hook onto the line. And so this thing was to stop that the town's not going to extend their service line or their service area. Okay, and then as far as the suspension of the sale of taps, that the town is not legally obligated to serve, okay, so the sale means the transfer or the conveyance of any right to use water, and if you can't sell it, you can't give it away. So the sale of the tap is to stop the extension of the obligation to serve water. Okay, and so the question is, what's the existing obligation with a tap? Well, if the coal company's got 300 and some taps, and this fine land up there where they're going to be selling lots that are going to get 5,000 and 10,000 square foot houses on them, unless the town does something proactively, they're going to be able to build houses with 7 bathrooms. And stuff like that. It's going to be the county zoning rules unless the town steps up and does something proactively to define what can happen there. But in town, the way I see it, it's mostly covered by your zoning laws. And the zoning laws are there, they need some work, but they mostly need a board to step up and and enforce them. And basically, you've got, for example, a single family zone. So what can a person in a single family zone do? They can build within their setbacks and within the permissible covered lot area, and they have to stay single family. And it's interesting to me that there's some discussion now that ADUs are allowed right now. I don't think they are, and I think that they shouldn't be, because they're an extension of the obligation to serve water. I like the idea of the EQRs. I think something like that is obviously needed. You should have an additional ante-in for a new load on the system, but an ADU is not going to come with a whole new law and stuff.
You have 2 seconds.
Okay.
10 minutes? All right.
So, and if you would take the definition, and the most ambiguous part of the water ordinance is the difference between the tap and the meter. And if you take them as obviously the same thing, all the confusion goes away.
Okay.
And then you can work on making that more equitable.
Thank you. You spoke very
I'd say
fast.
thank you. I'd say thank you to you if I meant it.
Yes. Mr. Martin.
Thomas Marco, 302 2nd Street. I just had a couple notes on this. One to trustee Thompson's question regarding additional use on a system. A new tap might not be necessary physically, depending on sizing, as Mr. Conklin noted. But there will be a change in use with additional people, is what it amounts to. When somebody else moves into the lot, there's going to be some more use. Demand's just going to increase there. And for Mr. Attorney Conklin, regarding one of your items, recommendations to pursue a water supply report to better understand the town's water supply and demand limitations. We need to get you up to speed on the water report that was commissioned in 2019 and began in 2020. I'll give you a lot of background on it as you'd like. But basically, at the end of the day, we don't have good numbers to give them. We don't have any results. But I've heard a lot of language that speaks as though this solution is precluded to be, okay, once we get this report, the moratorium will be lifted. The outcome of that report may be that the moratorium does not get lifted. So all of these problems may not be temporary. They may be problems that we have to deal with. And if we can begin dealing with them sooner rather than later, I believe we'll be in a much better position to do so fruitfully. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Mr. Merkel. Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Pass.
Sorry, this is, it's great. So it sounds a lot like what's happening now is you're changing definitions after the fact. The moratorium has been interpreted one way for 2 years. It's the reason in 2020 that we did not talk about ADUs after the GAPS committee did some pretty extensive research, brought it to the board, and the board tabled it because the board said at that time, we will not allow ADUs in R1 because of the moratorium. So now you're redefining that 2 years in, affecting every property owner, every potential property owner in town over the last 2 years. And it sounds like you're redefining it because of a specific case where something was approved without discussion with the board. I think that's something that you should all be considering, why you're at this point now. And just to clarify on ADUs, and I know that's not the topic, but the language has not been used accurately. ADUs are not allowed in our R1 zone. Multiple family dwellings are, well, 2 family dwellings are allowed in your R2 district by right. Not ADUs, 2 separate family dwellings. R3 allows multiple family dwellings. Again, they're not ADUs in those zones, they're just additional dwelling units that are allowed. In your commercial zones, C1 and C2, you're allowed to have residential use secondary to the business use. Not part of the business use that requires special review. So brush up on the code, they're important definitions. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Watts.
Suzanne Watson. I want to go back to the JDS Hydro report. I don't know where we stand with that right now. On the last I remember hearing was on February 4th. JDS Hydro wrote a letter to the board and they basically said they had no confidence in either of the systems yet. So I don't know, their contract is available. The original contract with JDS Hydro is available under additional documents under the Muni Code, if you go to our town code. But I'm kind of, I mean, I don't know, this has taken a long time and I know it's probably been a very frustrating experience for them and I'm not quite sure where they stand anymore with us. We're just stringing them along. And are they even interested in, I mean, when's going to be the termination at this point? When is all that information that we're providing? I mean, are there new dates that have been set to understand a little bit better? Because the last letter that I remember seeing was from February 4th. And They said that it says at this time, JDS Hydrate does not have confidence in the supply and production data that it has been provided. And they were talking about both the upper and the lower facilities in this letter. So now we're hearing that all this information is here and it's all the board's fault for swinging back and forth. But I don't see that in this letter that they wrote. So I'd like that to be looked at a little bit more closely. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Yes.
Christina Patterson, Price Road. So didn't we already have Bo Nerlin look at this? And now we're having our new lawyer look at this. And we had an executive session. I don't know how that came about because I thought it was already determined. And so now we're just parsing like words and definitions when in like what we should be doing is really looking at everything possible there is to lift the moratorium. So it seems to me, just a gut feeling, are there projects that are already in the works that are sort of skirting the water moratorium that's why we're doing this, like sort of runaround, and that concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, Mr. Zimmer.
Frederick Zimmer, German Creek Drive. My first question, Trustee Smith, how many bathrooms are there in the Hayes building?
This was strictly an example.
But yes,
I don't know.
you were incorrect.
No, I don't know.
So that's not helpful.
I'm sorry, but it was just an example.
But it was a bad example because it was
Yeah,
incorrect.
excuse me. This is
I
not
apologize,
bad.
I apologize. One question I have is, how can it make sense for someone like the folks who are here with a new tap to be able to build a house and put whatever infrastructure they're gonna put as far as water usage? What if they want 9 bathrooms? There's nothing in what's being discussed that's gonna stop that. So it doesn't make sense to say that, for example, the Hayes building, since I know that's on a lot of people's minds, and the suggestion that people are getting special treatment, et cetera, that's all existing. So there's no change. It's exactly what was there. So it's a permitted use, it meets all the zoning, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't understand why there would be any consideration to limit the usage. And the other thing is that for the last 2 years, since the water moratorium has been in place, construction's been happening all over town. I have a house that I added a kitchen and 3 bathrooms to, right? So that was within the regulations because it didn't require a new tap. So there has to be consistency. And the other thing to think about, if you can extend the service line, if you can't add a bathroom, if you can't, I mean, where does the construction industry go? There's so many things that can't happen. I don't think that was the intention. I mean, I appreciate the idea of no more taps. You can extend the system, but the system is what it is. And people have rights because they own a tap. So.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Yes, Ms. First.
So I want to address a few things. First of all, there's a lot of accusations being thrown around that we're doing this after the fact by board and staff, or public community members, that something's already been approved and we're trying to go around. At first, I would like to say that there's no ADUs or additional homes on lots, not even in a permitted by right, whether it was multi-family or duplex 2-family house or anything of the such has been built anywhere in the town since the moratorium's gone in place. When the moratorium went in place, absolutely construction continued where people remodeled kitchens, where people added a bathroom to their home, where it's all people who own a tap and they're the owners of the building and they've modified their structure with the number of people that live in their home. There's been no violation. What occurred was when an individual in the community who's not here, so I'm not going to say his name, brought a project to the town and asked for a permit, which was absolutely an addition of an ADU in the R1. And at the time that he was told no, that couldn't happen, then the project started to morph and be modified to try to circumvent that as an ADU and make it an add-on to the home by putting a long breezeway and different things. So I want to make that very clear. I'm not violating the moratorium or any such thing. But what occurred was that person came to the board because they were told no, and they asked the board to make a decision. And at that time, the board made a decision and said, hey, we're going to restrict this also on people's service lines on their property. That had never been the interpretation prior. It had never been the way that it was enforced. If someone wanted to add a bathroom to their home, they were allowed to do so. If someone wanted to remodel their kitchen, they were allowed to do so. At that time, when the board made that strict interpretation under Mr. former Attorney Nerlin, that was when we said, hey, okay, now the board has provided an interpretation that is completely different that had been adhered to since the moratorium went into place, and this needs to be reviewed. Because there are things that have happened and are in process that now conflict with this new regulation. Not because any staff member is trying to skirt any obligation or any rule or rewrite the rules or do anything different for any one person that they have not applied to anyone else in the community. And if board members or anyone has any specific questions or information on projects that they've received that they would like information on, instead of assuming that you know, I am always open to those questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so do we have any directions as far as, or just gonna let this be for now and we will come up again?
Well,
Mr. Thompson.
thank you. Sorry, I should have asked. I think the reason we went down the road with trying to define the definitions was not all of us agreed with Mr. Nerlin's strict interpretation. And the result of that interpretation was something that was not reasonable to what we're doing in the town, which is like, yeah, if you need a new toilet, you should be able to put a new toilet in. And so I think that's why we're here, is can we have a reasonable interpretation of the terms as they're written so that we can move forward as a town within the moratorium? And identifying that the moratorium is a water tap moratorium. And I think Mr. Brunner stated this, and I agree, it's like, we shouldn't be running delivery lines to new places to put new taps in. That's what the moratorium is for. And what we need the language to do is to meet the intent of the moratorium in the short term so that we can make a plan to get it lifted. And so I think that's where we are. We have a new board, we have new trustees coming on, and I feel like we should be tasked as a board. I'm not going to be here, but the board should be tasked with, adopting some interpretation of the language so that the town can implement the code and we can move forward with the bigger issue, which is how do we get this thing done? And so I don't know if we can get any farther. It's a discussion session, but I'm a little frustrated with how I think we need to put something down and move forward. It's like, it's time to keep going past this thing.
And I agree, and I think also the thing is, there are legal liabilities for changing that interpretation. So that someone who has put in a bathroom and somebody else wants to put in a bathroom can say, but they were allowed to do it under this moratorium, why can't I? So there are legal liabilities that come with this. So we really need to clean this up and make it so that those are clear, so that we won't get taken to court on it.
Well, and so there's some discussion of code, and what I've read, there are situations where you can run a line from a house with an existing tap to a new house. And what we need to decide as a board is that acceptable under the moratorium or not? Because right now, and I think that's what you're alluding to, is that right now, my interpretation of the code is that there are situations where that is allowed to happen. And I don't like, and somebody said, we can't stop people who own a tap from using their tap unless the law, steers us in a direction that makes it clear as how that tap is to be used. And so.
Yeah.
So I have one question. Is a two-family dwelling in an R2, is that two different footprints or do those buildings have to be connected? I don't know what the definition of.
Ferguson, I believe it's two separate buildings. It can be two separate buildings. Is that correct, Ms.
Two-family dwellings? Okay, that's why I'm wondering about the tap, because it says each one needs a meter.
Right,
Is what
but
it
you can
says.
have one line.
Right,
that
and
connects
then
the two buildings.
the meter tap seems to be interchangeable. So there's just one other thing. So I want you to know that I interpreted this in such a way that we did not run a water line from our house to our garage. I thought that violated the moratorium by adding an extra pressure so we did not. That was my interpretation, that I could not add extra pressure onto quantity required. Just so you know, that's where I was coming from. And lastly, I just want to say this is a discussion only, but at our next meeting, I would like to see a motion because we never got the head engineer from JDS to come and talk to us. We have not heard from the horse's mouth, what exactly do they need? And that could answer, I don't know where it'll take us, but we have to get that. He did not show up 2 meetings ago. We've got to get that person here, even if we have to pay extra, to find out exactly what they're waiting for, or are they done, or what? So that's a discussion point.
So
Thank
again, it comes back to, you have an interpretation, you have an interpretation, people all over have interpretations. We need to get this nailed down so that we're not at jeopardy here.
But we can't make a motion tonight. This is discussion.
And Madam Mayor, if I can make a couple of suggestions. What I'm hearing from all of the discussion is that there's agreement on 95% of the moratorium, and it's this little piece on which there was one position in the past and then a different position, and you've heard my opinion. So what we could do, or what I could do, is to bring back to the board, potential code amendments that are either one way or the other on that, and maybe do so in kind of with the lightest touch possible on that code piece. And if that's the direction of the board, I think you could provide me direction to prepare a code amendment for the board's consideration at a future meeting, number one. And then the second item I wanted to comment on was with respect to the report being prepared, and Mr. Markle alluded to, I think, some other work that had been done. And I think that is I haven't seen that, but it sounds like it would fit within what I'm about to say, which is, it sounds like JDS might be examining the physical supply capacity, but there's a separate question of what's the legal water supply and whether or not that's being fully utilized. And so I don't know if that's within the report. SGM has water engineers that complete that kind of work. And so I just don't want that piece to be missed as we're working through getting a better understanding and our arms around these water supply issues.
And I believe the question of the JDS report was that we weren't that the water rights themselves, were we getting all the water that we should out of our water rights? Do we have all our water rights nailed down? Not so much what comes down the pipe, but the rights themselves.
That's part of it.
Yeah, Mr. Knudsen.
I remember very distinctly the meeting where Bo Merlin came in and asked us about that. And in the process, my wife and I were buying a 1-bedroom, 1-bath house. And I voted for a very strict interpretation of this, leaving the meeting saying to a friend that I voted against my own interest because I would like to expand that house and have 2 bathrooms, okay? But I felt, as Trustee Smith has talked, that the honoring of moratorium is in the strictest sense of creating more demand. And maybe this equivalent residential unit concept would be really helpful in trying to put a cap on that would be fair. to people. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm trying to honor the moratorium. The intent of the moratorium is not to increase demand until we're released from this. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to prevent additional stress on the system. And that's all I'll say about that.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
I have two comments, and one is I think before we direct the attorney to change code, I think the board needs to come to an agreement on some part of the interpretation that we would like, some direction that we want to go in before we start changing the code. And with new trustees coming on, that discussion needs to continue because of these differences in interpretation. But my personal comment on this with the strict interpretation piece is like, what if I have another kid? You know, what if we have 3 more kids? And we put all this strain, there's additional use of the same tap. And so I think we need, that's where, and I'm being a little over the top because I think we need to be realistic about how we're honoring this idea, and it's a water tap moratorium. And so if a new tap is needed, we should consider not, selling that tap. And if a tap exists, you should probably be able to use the tap. I mean, but those are the kinds of interpretations that we need to come to.
Yeah, Ms. Ferguson.
I just want to add that I appreciate that because that's the kind of devil's advocate questions that are being asked at staff level. People are coming in and it's exactly that. When the previous town attorney made that statement and the board voted for strict interpretation, I had people coming in going, if I have a family of 3 and I have 1 bathroom, I have a family of 2 and I have 1 bathroom, is my family of 2 really putting more strain by adding a second bathroom? We're still using the same amount of water. We're still going to the bathroom the same amount of times. But now is my 1 bedroom, 1 bath house, or 2 bedroom, 1 bath house, am I increasing the demand on my 1 bathroom and my 1 kitchen if I sell my house and now my family of 3 sells it and it's a family of 8 that move into this house? That is exactly the kind of devil's advocate questions that are being asked when you start to define it by demand being how many bathrooms you have or versus, or how many people live in a house.
Okay, well, I would, my suggestion is we have the town attorney, do some codifications and then come back and we look at them. And if we like them, we take them. If we don't, we don't. But at least we get some consistency here. And some, yes, Mr. Thompson.
Madam Mayor, I'm just not sure that it's time to pay the attorney to make these changes until we have a better idea of what we see the interpretation of these things being. Because if we had done that with Mr. Nerlens, we would have paid him to do something that we're totally not like really in agreement with or we're confused upon right now. And so I'm looking at I appreciate the work that Mr. Conklin is doing. Like it's really nice to have the professionalism coming from that. But we're paying him a lot of money. And so I'm just wondering how much of this effort we can do before we ask him to write our code for us. I'm not disagreeing that we should have him do that. I just don't know if the timing is right.
Well, yeah.
Well, I was just 2 things. Again, I think we have to honor the fact that people voted for this too.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to be willing to compromise on the whole purpose for this. And, we'd probably have to look at Mr. Bruner to some extent, but for me, the big point is we cannot have a huge added drain onto our water system that wasn't in place when this was voted on. And we already know the taps, we can't do new taps. So I don't know if the other is relatively inconsequential and maybe we can fix it. But I agree with Jeff. It's too soon to ask our attorney to do something. I hate to do this to the new trustees, but we've done a lot of discussion and I'd propose we continue this with the new set of trustees and I don't want to ask Mr. Conklin to do anything else, but I think it'd be good because I know Thomas has more to say than 3 minutes. Well, he does, he says no, a little bit more. But he's been heavily involved in this, more so than I have with the Advisory Water Committee. I'm just thinking, let's go 2 more weeks and let it be on the next meeting to have a little bit more consolidated discussion. But if we could get Mr. what's his name from JDS in 2 weeks,
I'm emailing and asking
Thank
for
you.
availability.
I think that is really important to get done as soon as possible. Budget and JDS.
All right, so it sounds like the consensus is we let this go until the next meeting and then try to come to some consensus on how we want this as a board. Yes, Mr.
I feel the most valuable use of our current attorney is actually dealing with one of the things that came up in the JDS hydro report, and I'd rather see him working on whether our water rights are intact. We have not really tackled that, and that was one of the recommendations. Are our water rights strong? Are they valid? Do we have the proper documentation? And that's one thing I'd like to see.
All right. Okay, well, it sounds like this one is getting moved on to the next board. All right, did we agree that we're gonna do number 13? Or was that one getting put off as well?
This is a discussion.
Okay, so we're gonna have a discussion now on the administrator's report regarding the determination and application of residential use of a C1 zone. Ms. Ferguson.
Sorry, just making sure that they were up to date where we were at on the agenda. All the information is provided in the packet. We've had ongoing conversations, a community member request and board member request to discuss specifically the projects that are happening at 223 and 224 Grand Avenue, formerly known as the Masonic Lodge and Hayes Drug, but it's the Kennedy Building and is the name of the building. And so I believe this is a broader discussion than just the 2 people who are currently working on their building. So I did an extensive dive into the codes and all of the language regarding the C1, C2, and I believe that I've completely provided everything that the board needs to make a decision. I've also conferred with the town attorney a little bit on that and on his opinion of what he sees in the information that was provided, and I am happy to answer questions. I don't know if Jeff has anything to add right now.
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Conklin?
I'll just briefly add that Corinne and I touched base on her analysis, and I said more so just reserve my comments for questions as we get into the discussion, I guess.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions from the board on this? Yes, Mr. Thompson.
I'm jumping in.
Go for it.
We've been talking about water taps and what the things that seem to be open to discussion here are, was a new water tap needed to move forward with this work that is being done, and does it meet code? And so I asked the board, is that the correct, are those the issues, or are there other things that we need to be talking about in relation?
I think that pretty much sums it up, unless you have a different opinion.
Oh, I don't think water taps are the issue here at all.
Okay.
No, I think it's zoning and the fact that we have existing code that says multifamily dwellings have to have a special review in C1. And this is what we have. And I don't know why we are not just going forward with special review. Because there's no use by right there, because these uses have been abandoned. That's my, I don't know why we aren't following the code.
Okay.
That's
so
all.
All right.
Well, I think that's what we're talking, that's why we're having the discussion is what's the interpretation and what definition do the projects fall under? And I think the water tap is pertinent when you're talking about multiple family dwellings, but I believe that these structures have water taps and are up to speed on that piece. But I was looking at the definitions, I'm trying to find it and I apologize, in the code, and there's like three different things you could call these buildings. And to me, it seems like at least one of them was a commercial building with residences included. I can't remember the exact terminology. And so I think really the discussion here begins a little bit before what you're saying, Trustee Smith, in that it's like we need to identify where in the code the work falls, because to me, it seems like there's choices you can make.
I think it's clear. I think the code is perfectly clear.
Yeah, and I would disagree. I would say that according to, what was it, the last thing that was passed in 2016, C1 is allowed by right. They are permitted, they don't need special review or anything to have residential units as secondary to a commercial space.
But not units. That's a multifamily dwelling. You can't, one unit is in that zone, but not multiple ones, because a business owner can't live in multiple buildings.
But it's not just for business owners.
No, that's the problem, the secondary. And this is silly.
That's what I'm saying.
Because the whole thing with the special review is the people who have businesses downtown need to know what is going on and where are people gonna park. Each one bedroom has to have 1.5 off-street parking by code. That's the issue. All those things need to be taken into consideration. People cannot be parking on downtown and going in and out of a building to live. That is not allowed. And that's what the special review gets into, all that, so the businesses downtown. We all love downtown, and downtown was designed to be commercial. We need to ensure it continues to be a commercial enterprise, and people living upstairs do not usurp the businesses and people's ability to park in front of the business and shop. That's my bottom line.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Ferguson.
First, I would state that the commercial area actually was designed for mixed use. These buildings were built, Kennedy Building was built in 1905, the Masonic Building was built in 1908, and they have residential above the commercial. So I would say that the used to be Living Farm has residential above commercial. There are multiple buildings that have,
excuse me,
sorry, residential above commercial. Again, it goes back to a code interpretation, which I would think if you want a legal definition of what these are, but it says dwelling units as part of a business use, not a singular unit. A multifamily dwelling in C1 would be an apartment complex with no business use. That's multifamily dwellings within a C1. It would be, well, I know that I specifically had the definition conversation with the town attorney, and he concurred with the definitions. So I've provided all the information I think necessary, probably an overabundance of information, and I will reserve the conversation at the board level and with the town attorney.
So Mr. Conklin, so your interpretation of multifamily is like apartment building, and that under the definitions, C1 is allowed to have dwellings as a secondary use to commercial?
So the fundamental question here is, what use category does this fit within? And as was mentioned, there are three potential options: multifamily dwellings, dwelling units as secondary to a business use, or dwelling units as part of a business use. And not all of those terms are defined in the code. There is a definition of dwelling multifamily, and that definition does not include any commercial use component. It's my understanding that with respect to the two properties in question, that the primary floor, first floor rather, is used for some sort of commercial purpose. And so as a result of that, I don't know that, I think that removes the structure and use of the building from the definition of a multifamily dwelling. And instead, based on simply the title of, least with the component on the second floor, residential as secondary to secondary to a business use. And otherwise, in the absence of that, it kind of doesn't mean anything. Now, having said all that, once again, this is an area that's right within the code for some clarifications, because there's not a definition in the code of two of those use categories. I did not, I guess I will also say that this opinion is what I'm providing now is more off of reading town administrator's report and a conversation. But if you'd like me to prepare in more detail a written opinion, I'd be happy to do that. But that was kind of not what I was directed to do for today's meeting. But notwithstanding that, again, I think there's the fundamental question is which use category does this fit within, and how do we, our standard rules of construction, arrive at that? And if there is some question, there might be an opportunity to clarify that in the code.
Thank you. All right. Yes, Mr. Knudsen.
I think we're dealing with a hangover. Looking at previous board minutes, it's fairly obvious that the board had dealt with this in depth before, and that the board voted to allow residential and commercial structures. And some of the people that are complaining about it were former board members that lost that vote on the board. So I feel like we're dealing with a bit of a hangover here. I think the amount of documentation we've seen that came in, if I was in the same situation that our town administrator was in, I would have allowed that use because it was pre-existing. I don't see that it was. Previous owner had decided not to rent those out, but they were still existing. So that's what I say.
Anything else from the board?
I have some more general comments. And it's obvious that the building was designed for this. And so the intent was for people to live above this business. And I do think the town administrator makes a good point that the owners could just rent them and there's nothing that we could do about that. Like, I just don't, I don't know that, and I agree with Trustee Knudsen that in 2016, man, there was a lot of discussion about this and it seems like there was a decision made. The other point is more general or aesthetic, which I think having people live in town is, I think it's kind of a good thing. And we have the spaces, we need rental units in our town. The building was designed for it. It was spoken about ad nauseum in 2016. We have bigger fish to fry, I think, than this thing.
Thank you. Yes.
So again, my point is, let's have some common sense here. It's not just about the ordinance in this case, because I think the ordinance is clear. But here is the point. The ordinance talks about off-street parking must be provided. Ms. Ferguson's memo talks about the off-street parking that they already have at the Masonic building. So there's recognition of that management of our downtown corridor. So I'm not saying I'm against those apartments going in. The problem is, as I understand it, there were not that many apartments that are in use, and you lose it. If you don't use that use for a year, it's no longer a use by right. And that's in the code, and I sent that to Ms. Ferguson, and she responded saying, oh yeah, in light of the concern, I will notify the contractors in writing that there's a question regarding the legality of the process, which you've now since done. But again, we have a responsibility to ensure that mixed use is done properly, that the fire department can get into these buildings. I don't know how they're going in and out of the Masonic building and the Hayes building. You have to have egress and ingress. It's important that this be done in such a way that moving trucks aren't sitting in front of the Hayes building off and on. Or you have multiple people parking their cars, because you have to have 1.5 spaces for a single bedroom or a studio by our ordinance. and that's probably my big concern with the special review. We're not saying they can't do it, we just need to make sure it's done right. You don't want 10 people parked in front of the Masonic building and the Hayes building, and so that I wanna go shop and I have to park all the way down the street. So that's my point, and I don't think we need to split hairs necessarily on the secondary use, because to me, it was designed for a shopkeeper to live in the building, not a shopkeeper if a shopkeeper creates 4 apartments, they can't live in 4 apartments. That is an extra taxing, it's a different use than having the shopkeeper live in the building. And to me, that's the difference of what's in this code of the secondary too, and that's probably the biggest confusion. But the hell with that, excuse my language. The point is, we do not want downtown's culture to change. We need to do this right, and a special review allows the neighbors to know what's going on. The administrator is given an application that goes through the list. It goes to the planning commission. It's all done above board. Right now, I feel like I don't know what's in the Hayes building or the Masonic building. So that's my 2 cents in our discussion.
Okay. Yes, Ms. First.
I agree that parking is a requirement, and there's a certain amount of parking that has to be provided off-street, and that's for new development. The existing apartments that are in the Hayes building, parking, they're looking at that, and we're discussing the parking issues. There's no overnight parking allowed on Grand Avenue. There's no limitation on how long anyone can park on Grand. We have shopkeepers, people who run businesses that park in front of their business and stay there 8 to 10 hours a day, if not longer. As far as how those things are addressed when there's not a special review, new development, all of those things are addressed through the permit, through the review of a permit to build your new building, to build your new residences, and to make sure that you have appropriate parking. That's even there in residential. You have to be able to provide information about where you're going to park vehicles when you build a new house. Remember, we dealt with that with the Clark Avenue subdivision. So with the building formerly known as Masonic Lodge, we addressed their parking. That was part of the conversation with what they're working on, and is stated in there that they're talking about 3 studio apartments, there's not even a bedroom, and they have 5 parking places for units that they only plan to rent to 1 person. They don't even plan to rent to couples. So I agree with you that parking, it's their building, they can say they're only gonna rent to 1 person. I'm just stating, again, 3 studio apartments has no bedroom, therefore there may not be a code that specifically says how many parking spaces they have to apply. Again, it gets deep into semantics. I apologize, but the constant whispering every time I speak is very distracting, Mayor.
Ms. Watson? Ms. Watson?
We were looking at buildings, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, then take it outside and look it outside. You don't know.
We have a ventriloquist behind me. I'm sorry, why are you attributing?
Because I saw you standing there talking. Look, silence is a respectful activity if you are not.
I understand, thank you.
Ms. Watson, either you stop arguing with me or I will have you removed.
I said, be more careful. I'm sorry, I said, be more
Mister,
careful.
would you please?
She was agreeing with you.
Okay, then shut up.
Again, what I am trying to reiterate is that parking situations for new construction is absolutely dealt with through the planning process and the permitting process of new construction. Parking places cannot impose additional requirements on existing. A non-conforming use is something that's not permitted within the zone, that it goes through a review of the board, and the board allows a non-conforming use. And you are correct, if a non-conforming use is discontinued for 12 consecutive months, then it reverts. A prime example of that for board reference would be what used to be the Eleni's restaurant. It was a non-conforming use because it was a restaurant in a residential zone. At the time that the restaurant had been closed for 12 consecutive months, it reverted back to a residential home. Residential units in a C1 is not a non-conforming use, even if it requires a special review. It's permitted with a special review, which is not the circumstance with these.
Mr. Knudsen.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. There are 2 important items that I think we definitely need to do, and I'm noting that the time is
Oh my God,
almost
we've
10
got to do
minutes
this
after
first
9.
one.
So
Yes.
first of all, Two of us will be signing checks tomorrow, and without approval of disbursements, we can't sign those checks. And secondly, we will be losing a trustee who has an important item that he and I have both been working on about the ad hoc committee recommendations that I think is important, that can be discussed while he's here and not put off till the meeting. So I'd like to make a motion that the disbursements and item number 14 be discussed at this time.
Okay, can I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, then let's move on then to disbursements.
Find them. Page.
It's in your notebook.
Disbursements, 'cause I did this word. Page 143.
Thank you. Without this, I'm gonna do it this way. I move that we approve payment of accounts payable in the amount of $167,682.03, which includes the amount listed here and also Mr. Workbook Service, $1,626.92, which is a few pages down. Also payment of the loan in the amount of $11,671.70. The Norris Retirement, $1,680. The Chase Credit Card, $1,828.10. And transfer to payroll and payment of a payroll of $23,696.82. And payroll taxes of $18,909.18.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, discussion from the board?
I just have two questions on page 145, and it is, why are we paying that $100 to the HOA, Pan American?
For the property that the town owns up there.
So say it again, I'm sorry.
For the property the town owns up there.
What is it? I don't know about that. Where it's a town owned. That's cool.
Lot in front of Apple Valley Park.
Oh, between the street and the park? Okay.
Yeah, Pan American, it's an assessment that anyone in Pan American has to do, and so I used to live up there, and that's one thing the town.
And I didn't realize that the park, because it's a piece of
It's a lot.
animals. Okay, thanks. And then I was wondering, looking at the phones billing, could you upload that contract as well to Unidocs? Because we spend a lot, and I'm assuming you have a contract with phones?
We do, but it's not specific to these things. It's a standard IT contract.
Could you upload that, please? And there, it looks like we have a last payment to SGM? Is that right? For GIS mapping? Is that, it says final?
We did some work last month, yeah.
But that's not your SGM capital asset contract, it's a different one?
No, that's that contract, yeah.
Oh, it is that one?
Yes.
So are we done with that contract now, then?
It should be,
That final payment?
I was looking up invoicing while I was sitting here, and we don't have any additional fees coming this month, so yes, that would have been the end of it.
Okay, thank you. So that brings me to a question. I've heard that the trustees need to approve these reports. And we have not approved the SGM report, and I don't know if that's something that needs to be done. Is that something that's normally done? I've heard that talked about several times, like with the JDS report. It's in draft now. JDS is draft, and at some point we get a final and we approve it.
We received the final in March when he presented it to the board and the board accepted and requested the SOPs.
Okay, so that is our tacit approval. Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else from the board? All right, anything from the public? What?
I do want to make the board aware that while the final disbursement is included in the disbursements for the Western Slope Consulting, that I would request that the board allow us to hold that check until we receive the final report.
Can we get a motion?
I move that we hold that check until we receive the
I'll
final report.
enthusiastically second.
All right. Any further discussion from the board?
This is the Paonian motion
Yeah.
that has not done, we got a draft report. They've invoiced us for the final report, and they haven't given us a final report. So, I think we just hold that money until we see it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right. Anything from the public? Yes, Chris. Set the timer, please.
Chris Kim, Minnesota Creek Road. I have a question on the route bill. Is this final? It says second draw request.
It is the final bill.
It is the final? And I'm still gonna complain about the mobilization fees?
And let me rephrase, there is a change order that's in there if you look at, and I sent this information.
I must have missed the change order.
Yeah, because it's not in here, it will be on the next agenda because we didn't have it in time to put it in here. From the quote that was given and the final breakdown, there is, I apologize, I'm not in the disbursements. There is a approximately $7,000 difference. And so that will be on the next, and that's the final for this.
Well, if he forgot, if the mobilization fees went away, you wouldn't have to pay that $7,000. And supply delivery, I mean, I understand it takes time to go get stuff, and I don't have a problem with that. But I know like on the last, my husband saw and my son saw Roops, two of their employees at Bollinger and Queen on a Saturday, buying parts. They charged the town for 2 hours to go get parts from Bollinger and Queen for two guys, when only one needed to go get it. You know, I know.
I'm hearing this, so I can't.
Well, but that's the thing, nobody, you know, that's why I've been doing this, and this is the first chance I've had to say anything about it. So I think you guys really need to watch Roop.
Thank you. All right. We have a motion and a second to accept disbursements. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion passes. All right. Let's look at the ad hoc recommendations. Gentlemen, it's in your court.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was kind of energized to look at the structure of our meetings. The very first meeting that I was a part of was 5.5 or 6, like almost 6 hours, I believe. And I think there's room to do better. And some of the revisiting to this is really, I think, to pull us all together in an understanding of what the order of the meeting is and how the meetings will be managed. And so there's a lot of issues involved with this, and I think some of those issues are in the building of the agenda and how much we're trying to cover, and some of those issues are in the order in which we do business, and some of the issues are our recognition of the participation of the public in the meetings. And so our attempt as an ad hoc committee was to try to create a structure that would be manageable, well understood, and efficient. And we have new trustees coming on. The draft, it's very clearly a draft, and the intent is to pass it on in hopes that we can create a better meeting structure. So, and part of this is having these hard stops. And so we've been working on proof of concept with that in the last few meetings, and it feels to me like we're being more efficient in use of our time, both as trustees and with members of the public, and the understanding that we want to move through these meetings. And so what we've developed is a red line document of the last time this was addressed was in 2017. I don't know if it's red line, it's black line here, but any changes are apparent in the document. And I guess the other points are, when people show up, I really think we need to give them an opportunity to speak. It's really disheartening to come to a meeting and wait until 9:30 to have your chance to address your issue. And just give some really hard structure to the way we do business in this room so that people can participate as much as possible. And that as a working person with kids, like, I want to be a part of this process. And if we can walk in knowing that you're going to walk out at 9:30, being heard and getting things done, that's what we're trying to do. I don't know if I missed anything.
Want to add to that, Dave?
Well, one change that I really wanted to see was where we do executive sessions, because I think it's unfair to the public to sit there and wait for an executive session at the end of the meeting and waste all this time waiting for us to come out when we typically don't even take action. So, and the other thing is the use of our attorney, because we're paying an hourly rate now for attorney services. And I felt like it would be better to have the attorney services condensed into the meeting at the beginning of the meeting, and then we're done. And if we have additional questions for the attorney, those can be transmitted so that at the beginning of the next meeting, the attorney is there. And this is an attempt not to try to exclude you from the meeting, Jeff, but basically I want to be conservative about how we're using your time. And I felt like if executive sessions were posted earlier at 6 o'clock and they were properly posted and the agenda item was announced, and then we went into at 6 o'clock PM, the agenda item, then hopefully we'd be more disciplined in our executive sessions, get out at 6:30. The public could then hear and comment on any action right at the beginning of the meeting. If it was important enough to go into executive session, it should be important enough to put it up at the beginning of the meeting. So that was one thing that I really advocated for as a change that I think would give the public more access to how our decision-making is going and also see it in action. The other piece was, I've been embarrassed being on this board to see people come in from other organizations to make a presentation to the board, and they get hammered by public comment. When it's really not appropriate at that time, they're making a report to the board. And I do want to say, I really appreciate and I'm grateful for the amount of engagement we have from our citizens. There's a whole bunch of towns that just meet kind of on their own and nobody goes to their meetings and there's very little reporting in their meetings. There's no watchdog kind of thing. So at times it's really frustrating to hear all the feedback that we get back. And sometimes it feels like it's too much, but I really do appreciate the fact that we do have public members coming in and watching what we're doing and holding us to account for things that we've done. So I do feel though when a vendor or an individual comes in, I think one example might be the Learning Council, when they came in to do a presentation about trying to do the park, they were very embarrassed by how much they had to deal with that thing. And so part of the change was also suggesting that we, when there's a report to the board, that report is to the board and there's a back and forth between the board and that individual, but it's not open to public comment. Public can comment on it at the next meeting, or when there's a decision to be made, then of course the public can comment. But this is a report to the board. So I wanted to make it easier for people from organizations or vendors to come in and be able to report to the board and interact with us. So there we go. That's it.
Yeah. I'd just make a couple more points. And one, almost every week for the first 3 months, we had meetings every week. And on section 12 of our document, we identified having one day a month specifically identified for special meetings. And so if there's anything we need to do, we can funnel it to that day. And it's predictable and I can schedule my work around it, or we know when we need to be there. It was very frustrating getting started, having a job and trying, like, always being engaged in a meeting. And sometimes it was like a half hour, or sometimes it's an hour. And so trying to create some structure that addressed that. And the other piece that I wanted to mention, and it came up today, is with Michelle sending that email, like, and Miss Watson's been good about that. I'm sorry about the decorum. But having that kind of information before the meeting is really helpful. And having that kind of public comment and interaction in writing like that is super helpful. And so there's language in here that tries to encourage that kind of forethought ahead of coming into the meetings so that we can consider that during the meeting instead of hearing it for the first time. Because like I'm not always the quickest thinker, and I get home and I'm like, oh man. And so to have that kind of information ahead of time is super helpful. So just trying to structure the way that we gather information from the public so that it's more digestible and more applicable as a trustee was part of the goal. And again, it's like, we have no intent to vote on this or push it through before the end. Like, it's just, I feel like it's something that we need as a town, is like a mutually understood set of sideboards so that we can move forward, so that the mayor can facilitate these meetings and we're all on the same page as to how they're supposed to happen. And then we can get out of here, at 9:30, having gotten our business done. So I welcome any input. Criticisms are appreciated. Try to be nice, and I hope that the board continues to work on what we're trying to accomplish with the document.
So any questions for Jeff or Dave? Yeah.
Just a procedural question. So we are just going to continue this?
Yeah.
So the next trustees can go through it and, okay. Because I have some comments, but there's no point in bringing them up now.
Right. Yeah, Ms. Pat.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate your work on this. I'll email some comments. But I also think it's a little ironic that you mentioned not making people wait and wanting to hear from the public. And you're running out of time to hear from visitors and guests, and you do have people that have waited to speak to you tonight. So I would strongly urge you to move visitors and guests to the next item on your agenda and give people an opportunity to speak. Thanks.
Thank you. I agree.
All right, well, we have 3 minutes. Visitors and guests, anybody want to take their 3 minutes now? Go for it, Suzanne.
So I was curious, I wasn't able to ask this under the administrator's report because that got curtailed. I was looking at the ORC ad, RFP, and they're all outdated. The one on the town's website, the date that you had to hand in your information was March 21st, and same with the one with the rural water board that we're advertising. And are we getting any applications? Because it looks like it's all over at this point. So that was a question. I wanted to bring that to your attention. And then the other thing I wanted, it's for Jeff Conklin's edification, is the word secondary doesn't mean you use your second floor for your business when you're in the residential zones. You're allowed business use of your home secondary to the primary function, which is residential. And you don't have to have a second floor to have a business. It just has to be clearly incidental to the primary use, which is residential. And so I think you weren't looking at the whole enchilada there. And then finally, with that water ordinance, I think it would be good to direct the town administrator to put the code sections that apply to the water lines accessory buildings in front of you. I think that might be in the water ordinance, but you kept talking about codifying the code, but I'm not sure exactly what sections you're talking about changing. And I think you could have your administrator or clerk put that information in front of the board as a good starting point. So we all are on the same page about what code sections you'd like the attorney to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have 30 seconds. Talk fast, Thomas.
Your Parks Comprehensive Plan was presented today for public comment at the Teen Center. I thought it was pretty cool, but it was very poorly attended. You might consider censuring your chair for telling the public to shut up. And I got a couple other comments about stuff that's more particular, so I'll just leave it for next time.
Thank you. All right, it is 9:30 and we are adjourned.
Can I just make one motion that we ensure that item 15 is continued to the next meeting?
Oh, it will be.
Okay, I didn't know if we had that.
Yeah,
Okay,
it will be.
great, thank you.
All right, get out of here.
Good evening, everyone. See you next meeting.
Yeah, what are you gonna get to? Oh, in next to what you said you were gone, when I said I was the sticks, you said you were gonna.
And mine. I was taking notes.
Oh my God.
The thoughtful comment.
What did you say? Oh, you oh, you had it too?
Having a thoughtful comment.
Okay, so the sticks, is there a new one?
I adopted that.
Okay, so I can.
I'm like, oh, I need to
Everybody say, what the heck are you doing?